So we have learned all those various built-in functions and things like that. Let me see how long is this. Any questions in the before? Those are quite straightforward. Okay, now we are trying to go more into the programming flow, and here is where we are going to use the conditional statements and iterations. So for loops, if else statements and things like that. So this is all what we have actually learned through before. So let us look at it to actually make certain decisions. We have already learned this in C, but we are just going to very quickly recap. So we can actually use the conditional statements, the if, else if, and else. So the if statement, you can actually use it alone, but then whenever you use the else if or else statements, you have to accompany it with an if statement, right? You always have to start with if, then or else if, or if or else. So if, we can just have one single statement, so it's not a problem. So the if statement, okay, in Python, how you actually the syntax is, you actually specify the if, then you can actually specify what is the condition, followed by a colon, then you specify the statement. So this is the syntax. This is how a syntax is supposed to be. And another thing, that you see that the indentation now we start to apply here for the statements, the conditional statements. For the statement, we have to specify the, we have to impose the, we have to apply the indentation. You can have more indented statement after statement 1, not a problem. So this is the set the condition if true or false, like this is a simple this one. So let us try to do some example. So let's say as an example, when you record marks obtained by a student in a particular subject, total marks shouldn't exceed 100. We shall display a warning or an error message when, due to some error, marks of the student exceeded 100. Python, okay, now how we would like to incorporate this if statement. So this if statement is quite easy, right? This is just you want to check if the student marks is more than 100. If it's more than 100, you print an error message, that's all. So in this case, it's not a complicated conditional statement, it's just one single statement. So let's see how we can write that. So let's see, we're just going to define this, obtain marks, let's say 120. So we are just defining an integer value variable of 120. So now we're going to apply the if statement, and remember, if statement need to have with a colon, right? So inside here, the if statement is where we want to apply the condition. So we want to check if the obtain marks. So here is where we use the comparative operator. So what is the comparative operator that we want to check, apply? If it's larger than 100, what do we want to do? So when you press enter, automatically it's indented. The indentation applies automatically. So we can just say print invalid marks. So if you run this, you get the error message. Is that okay? So this is all easy, so I'll go a bit fast, then we'll spend time in the more complex one. So take note that the colon after this particular condition is important because it separates the condition from the statement to be run after the condition is evaluated. So, the condition inside the if it is evaluated, it will return true if the condition is met and false if not met. So, we can actually use conditional arithmetic and other operators to design a condition. So, we can also use the value of a variable input by user to form a condition. So, for example, we can actually ask the user to now enter, because the earlier one we have defined it, right. What if the user, they want to actually enter? So, let us see how we can actually capture the input. So, first thing, let us say you are coming a system, so there should be a prompt, right? Please enter the student's mark. So, let us say we are going to print to the students. This is what the first thing that you are going to see. So, what we are going to do here is we are going to write in one statement whereby we capture the input of whatever we are typing later, and we capture the input as what kind of data type and in what variable we want to store. So, let us say I want to, later the user is going to type in something, that value you want to store it into particular variable. So, you can actually use it to compare and then give out the message, right. So, let us say I am going to name it as obtain marks. Now, if you notice that I didn't define this obtain marks as what, integer, string, I didn't define the type at all, because I am going to do it here. It goes to integer, and we are going to use this is another built-in function which is input. So, whatever input that you type will be captured as an integer. So, because I have already captured that as an integer, the obtain marks is also by the same data type. Yeah, if you put character, then whatever the input that you are typing will become character. So, why we are actually interested in this particular case integer is because it is easier for us to apply the comparative operator. If you apply it as a string and string you cannot compare, what, right. The closest operator that you have actually used to identify whether is this a string, is it a decimal or not, but it does not convert that string into the equivalent value, right. So, that makes it difficult for you to make a comparison between string and string, unless if you are looking at the length of the string. Yes, if a user is actually inputting a character string more than 10, for example, then you can evaluate the length of the string, is it larger than 10, and if yes, then you print out something. But in this case, because we are looking at the marks, so we have to define the data types accordingly, so that we can actually apply the comparative operator, then only you can give out the true or false, right. So, we capture this, then now we apply if obtained marks, if it is larger than, the same thing we do, do not forget the colon. Now, you print invalid. So, try to run this, you see it asks you to enter, please enter the student's mark. So, if I put 80, there is no output because we did not define anything, right. But let us say if you run this, then if you put in 110, it gives an output, invalid marks. Any question up to this point? It's quite straightforward. Let me copy this for the next one. So here, if you notice, as I mentioned, if you run this, if you get a value larger than 100, then of course you get the warning right. But if you entered 100 or less, you don't get anything. So then we have to actually use like the else statement. So as we mentioned earlier, it's never used alone. So always this is the syntax. You should have the condition. If the first condition is not fulfilled, then it automatically will be the second one. So let's try this one. The same thing. So we have this, so we are going to put else. So if you do this, if I put 80, then you can actually get good. If you put anything more, invalid marks. So in this way, either way input that we give, it gives that an output, gives that response. So then you may ask, but this one, so less than 100 can be 80, 50, 40, 20, could be various levels, right? If everything put 20 also get good, not so good one. Then you can actually use the nested operation, right? Nested decision. So we'll do this one, the last one, then we'll end the class. So let's say if you want to perform for complex decision, like I mentioned, like for example your grades, right? You have multiple categories. So you can actually do all this thing and via the nested decision. So the statement to perform nested decision in Python is an if else statement. So suppose we want to display a warning if the marks of a student are greater than 100 or less than 100. So this is some basic criteria. Furthermore, we want to show the remarks as follows: excellent if the marks is 80 or greater, not excellent, marks are less than 80. So if you look at the flow chart, so expression 1, what is expression 1? This is the first expression, right? Is it greater than 100 or less than 0? If it's greater than 100 or less than 0, you want to straight away print out the invalid marks, negative or more than 100. But if it fulfills within this 100 and also 0, then it goes here, right? The second expression. So second expression got another 2 more condition. If the marks is 80 or greater, then it gives excellent. Otherwise, it gives not excellent. So it's a nested. So how do we define this? So let's put back. So what is the first statement that we want to check? The first one. What is the first expression? More than 100, less than. So do we need to put if, then another if again? It is in one statement, we can actually also apply 2, right? So we can actually use logical operation, remember? We have or, and, those kind of operations. So you don't have to put if and then another if, too much of ifs. So this is one. If obtained mark is more than 100, which one shall we use? And or? Why or? Yeah, it's either one. If you put and, then this statement will never get executed. Or obtained marks if it's less than 0, which is negative value, right? So if this is the first expression, so this is expression 1. What are you going to do? You're going to print invalid marks. You don't have to do one statement for 100, then another if for less than 100. One shot you can write. Right? Now what is the nested one? Now we have to use else if, right? Else if the obtained marks is what? 80 or more. So it is more or equals to 80. Then don't forget the colon. So what do you want to print? We want to print excellent. Now the last one, do you want to put else if or else? Yes, because now with the larger, you already filtered out to make sure that they are within 100 to 0. That's the first thing you have done. So it goes to else if. So it only can be from 80 to 100. If not, automatically it goes not excellent, because that's the only condition you have, right? So the last one you have just mentioned as else. Print not excellent. So now we have multiple, you can have 3 outputs. So if you put more, you get invalid mark. If you put negative, invalid marks. Okay, first one okay, ready. So if you put mark 85, it says excellent. If you put 70, not excellent. So for all these various inputs, you are able to get various outputs, right? Alright, so in our next class we will look at the switch statement.